Oh, here we go. Oh, Seattle already knows to boo Bettman. Jeremy Lauzon is the first pick. Yeah, Jeremy Lauzon is a good defensive player. Young guy. Cheap contract for one more year. He'll be a top pair, probably top four defenseman, I would imagine, right away, and a top pair defenseman coming in the future here. Oh no, they're going after Sabres right away. All right, Lenny Wilkins here to announce the Sabres pick. Let's see who this one will be. Lauzon, I think we kind of saw that one coming, even if you didn't see any of the leaks. That was easily the best pick from Boston, so it's solid pick. Definitely happy about that. I would see some lists that didn't have Lauzon on them, and I was like, if they don't take Lauzon and didn't get a side deal, then that would have been disappointing. Seattle takes Will Borgen from the Sabres. Interesting. All right, it was either him or Colin Miller. Another good young defenseman. Definitely going young, which is kind of what we expected. I think we're expecting this to be a pretty cheap roster that's definitely on the younger side. Building a good young D line for the future. Lauzon again will be able to contribute right away. Borgen. Okay, they're announcing Detroit's pick with an octopus. Makes sense. Interesting. All right. That was definitely one of the guys I was looking at. Probably not. I was thinking of Evgeny Svechnikov, but again, another younger guy. Kind of what we've looked at coming into this draft was that Seattle's going to be probably strong on the defensive end, which will help the situation in goal as well, where they should be pretty good. So probably a team that won't get scored on too terribly much, and then the trade-off is scoring might be an adventure. Florida, they're taking Chris Drieger. Yep, this one I think we kind of saw coming for a while. And there it is, the first Kraken jersey. All right. I kind of figured he would be the first one on the stage in the jersey, and there it is. Our first look at it. Looks basically like what they talked about a while back. Is what they released when they released the name. This is basically the exact same jersey. So we've kind of already seen it, but now it's official. That is officially what the jersey looks like. Coming off of a very good season. He was fifth. They say fifth in the NHL, but yeah, a 927 save percentage. So there's Chris Drieger. Again, it says UFA here, but they have a contract worked out with him somewhere in the ballpark of 3 years, $3.5 million per. Cale Fleury. All right, got one of the two Fleury brothers that was available. Could turn into a pretty good player. Not a ton there right now. Just one goal in 41 games last year. So again, this is kind of more of a prospect, younger defenseman for the future. But the big news there is it's not Carey Price. Not Carey Price. It's for the best. Again, $10.5 million for 5 more years on Price. That's steep, and we knew that they wanted to stay a little bit lower on the cap so they can go crazy in free agency. Joey Decord from the Ottawa Senators. All right, this is probably your AHL goalie unless he gets traded. I would imagine, unless they're going to pick another goalie, and there's Kapanen from Minnesota still out there, and Vanacek as well. I can't imagine he's even a 1B at the start of the season. He's probably the AHL goalie unless he gets traded. But Joey Decord, we'll see what happens here from Tampa Bay. They left some big names available. And Yanni Gord, all right, so no Tyler Johnson. A trade did not happen, I would imagine. Forward, probably center. You're probably looking at first-line center, maybe second-line center, depending on who else I guess they get. Or free agency, obviously. They could pick up a center in free agency, but this is the position that was probably the lightest in the expansion draft. So good pickup there. Obviously, you're helping out Tampa Bay a little bit because you're taking off one of those big contracts with all the cap issues they have. But he's a good player, so help yourself first and then worry about whether or not you're helping someone else. These guys are not pulling any punches going after the Leafs now as well with their drought. Jared McCann. Oh, all right. This is hey, again, another solid guy that can play center. Picked up from Pittsburgh by Toronto just a couple of days ago for, was it Philip Hollander, I think, and a 7th rounder, and then was left exposed the day after he was traded for, and they got him in a Leafs jersey there, but I don't know if he even had time to put on a Leafs jersey. So, yep. traded for one day, exposed the next, and a couple days later, he's with the Kraken. Never touched the ice for Toronto. To be fair, it makes sense. McCann be the selection. They basically end up protecting Kerfoot for Hollander in a seventh, while the rumors were Seattle was looking for a first and a third to not take the first guy that they want. In the end, it effectively they protect Kerfoot for a prospect in a seventh rather than a first and third. So it makes sense, but it does kind of it looks funny. Definitely looks funny. Again, center and forward is going to be the hardest spots to fill, but that's a couple of pretty solid picks there. Obviously, we're not looking at a superstar isn't going to be on the forward end for Seattle or really even on the defensive end right out of the gate. But again, Gordon McCann, assuming they don't get traded, because still a lot can happen before the start of the next season. But both Gordon McCann, solid players. Definitely will be able to contribute right away in the top six for the Kraken. No Kerfoot. They went McCann in Toronto over Kerfoot, which honestly, like I took Kerfoot in my draft, but it was a toss up for me between Kerfoot and McCann. McCann is a little bit younger. He's a year younger, a little bit cheaper. Like I guess he will be an RFA at the end of next season. So again, that may be part of it. Kerfoot would have been a UFA in 2 years. So a little bit more control. It is one fewer year of the contract, but a little bit more control with him going to be an RFA next season. Morgan Geekie, interesting, from the Carolina Hurricanes. Huh. Definitely was thinking Jake Bean here. Definitely was thinking Jake Bean. So I wonder if there's a trade attached to this one. Obviously, like Geekie was the next best option. So like maybe they just decided they had enough young defensemen already in the draft available to them, and they went for Geekie because he is a center prospect. Yeah, that's another good point. Geekie, maybe that's part of why he took him. Ron Francis actually drafted Morgan Geekie back when he was the GM of the Hurricanes. I didn't see that one coming. So from the Blue Jackets, Gavin Bayreuther. Max Domi was available. He had an injury that probably was going to hold him out for the first month or so of the season, but I haven't heard them talking about any trades or side deals yet, but I can't imagine they went with Bayreuther over Domi for nothing. Nathan Bastian from the Devils. Yeah, that makes sense. That's who I picked. So this is a pick that I'm fine. He's big, 6'4", 6'4", 205. So he's big. The kind of scout on him is he doesn't skate super well for a forward, especially. So probably doesn't turn into a top six or like that down the road. He probably doesn't project into that unless he just becomes a great skater out of nowhere, but could maybe be a third liner down the road with that size. Jordan Eberle. All right. Yeah, this is so the Islanders are one of the teams where we're like looking at the protection lists come out. Oh, and here we go. Here's the away jersey. Here's the away jersey in white. Oh, that looks nice. The logo is big on the front of it, which is I'm a huge fan of. Like, there's so much space there. Have a small logo, just kind of like got to use that space somehow. I can't wait to get my hands on one of those. That was a nice looking jersey. Colin Blackwell from the New York Rangers. All right, reputation for being very hardworking. This was another guy that was a surprise. Not like a necessarily big name surprise, but a surprise to see on the protection list. It wasn't even a guy that I think I even talked about in my Rangers video because I just kind of assumed they would protect him. The guy they passed on to take Blackwell and the guy that I took in my expansion draft was Julien Gauthier. So again, so this is a center, obviously, but he's cheap, which is probably part of the reason they went here. And $725,000 next year, then set to be UFA at the end of next season. Assuming he stays part of the team, this is very clear that they're going towards keeping this roster cheaper. So especially when we get to we'll see what happens when we get to some of the bigger contracts we looked at in mock drafts, but this is a pretty cheap roster so far. Blackwell third line, yeah, probably good fit. Assuming he stays with the Kraken again. They're picking 30 players here, and if you look at Vegas's, 11 of the guys Vegas drafted in their expansion draft never hit the ice for Vegas once. So A lot of these guys, and by a lot I mean probably about a third of them, again, just like that, and maybe even more because of how crazy free agency is going to be, probably won't ever play for the Kraken. Turin Carson Tur what? Young prospect AHL guy, I guess. Like there are some big names that were available there. Is side deal? Like, it doesn't seem like they're doing side deals because there's a couple of these names now that are surprises, and we have not seen a side deal talked about. So maybe they're going over that like at the end. Maybe they're just trying to get the picks, and then maybe side deals will come later. But yikes, that's if they took him over JVR especially without any kind of anything coming back, that's surprising. But again, we heard there were a lot of side deals, and they haven't talked about a single one yet. So I'm kind of thinking that they're just glossing over that now, and I guess we'll find out about side deals later. So I guess we'll see. But Brandon Tanev from the Penguins. See, that's a pick that makes sense. And he's here. All right, another away jersey. He's already got 13 locked in. All right. I mean, obviously, most of these guys are probably going to get their numbers because they. I think Tanev. He was. I was kind of surprised. I forgot about his photo. I forgot about that photo. Oh man. Vitek Vanacek. All right, that's kind of who we expected. We got the second goaltender. This is probably the 1B. I was starting to get worried with some of those other names that we saw that we weren't going to see Vanacek here. Yeah, there weren't a ton of options from the Caps, especially obviously TJ Oshie not available. This, assuming nothing changes in free agency, I think this is Drieger Vanacek is a solid 1-2 with Drieger probably the 1A, Vanacek the 1B. Let me know what you think, obviously, but it's a solid duo. That's what I had in my mock draft, and everyone wants Vancouver. They're asking who you want the opponent to be for the first home game. Vancouver Canucks. There it is. Yep. You knew the NHL was going to do it. You know, they're like, so the first Kraken game is going to be on the road. It sounds like against Vegas, and those are kind of the two rivalries that you knew the NHL was trying to make happen. Tyler Pitlick, all right, from Arizona. Arizona was kind of a wild card. This is one for the longest time. The longest time, it was like this was the one I had locked in. It was going to be Aiden Hill. They couldn't do anything about it. We were like, that was going to be our probably 1B goalie, honestly. And then they traded Aiden Hill off to San Jose, where he'll be the starter. I'm assuming he'll be the starter there. And then it was, who the heck are they going to get from Arizona? There's not a lot of options. Tyler Pitlick. John Quinville from the Blackhawks? All right, there's a trade. There's no way. There's no way. With John Quinville, are you kidding me? Didn't get the pronunciation right, but Jonas Donskoy from the Avalanche. So they're trying to sneak that Blackhawks pick. Just like, all right, well, this is who Quinville from the Blackhawks and Donskoy from the Avalanche. So yeah, that's the one. Focus on that. Focus on that. We got Donskoy from the Avalanche. Don't worry about who we got from the Blackhawks. Sure, Nikita Zadorov was available, but we got Donskoy from the Avalanche. That's the important thing. Jamie Alexiak. See? This is the one I went out on a limb with my mock draft. And I guess it wasn't that big of a limb because there's like nothing from the Stars, but that's a solid way. Oh, and he's here. All right. Missing front teeth and all. Carson Soucy. All right. Yeah. Another defenseman, another solid defenseman. So we knew this blue line was going to be pretty good. This is going to be a pretty good defensive group that they've got. So if they keep Soucy, he probably does start out third pair, and maybe he sneaks up into the second pair eventually. But he is 26 and still has 2 years left on his contract, which isn't too bad. 275 on that contract. I feel better about Haxtell as the coach than I feel about Quinville as the pick from the Blackhawks. But what are you gonna do? He's not bad. All right, maybe Quinville's better. I guess I don't know a ton about Quinville, and it was more. I guess my reaction there is less about Quinville and more about who else was available. Obviously Zadorov we mentioned. Calvin DeHaan is another one where like contribute right away. Granted, he is 30 and 4.5 million is not nothing. Even on the forward end, if you want a guy without a contract, there's Adam Gaudette was there. So if you're going to go with a forward, and Quinville's 25, so it's not like he's old, but he is set to be a UFA, so they'd have to get a contract unless they're just like picking him to let him walk and save money, which could be, maybe they're just, picking him to let him walk. But if you're gonna do that, why wouldn't you get like Adam Gaudette's 24, brighter future, higher ceiling, and he's an RFA. So if you're just picking a guy to let him walk anyway, then I feel like you could have picked Gaudette and then probably gotten something honestly via trade if you weren't going to keep him anyway. You never know. There was like Vegas had big surprises. No one thought William Karlsson was going to turn into the player he's been for them, for sure. Oh, Marshawn Lynch is announcing Nashville. I kind of thought they would have save him for the Sharks because he's from Oakland. So I was kind of thinking they'd save him for the Sharks, but oh, sorry if that was loud on the mic. This is the first pick, right? This is the first pick? Yeah, Marshawn. It's the first pick. That's how this works. Yeah, I got my boy Callie Yarn. He didn't say Yarncrow. He wasn't even going to try with that last name. He just looked at. He's like, got my boy Callie. Don't blame him. Callie Yarncrow though from Nashville. This is who I originally took. I ended up switching it to Jakub Trenin, and I still kind of got attached to the Trenin pick. He's a good young player, but definitely not upset with Callie Yarncrow. Another solid forward that can contribute right away. Oh, Bobby Wagner, all right. From Marchand to Wagner. Gotta love it. Bobby says, I'm just glad I got an easy name to pronounce. The Seattle select Vince Dunn. Yeah, not a hard name to pronounce. So yeah, as soon as he said easy name to pronounce and it was the Blues, I guess you weren't going to get Tarasenko. Mason Appleton, all right. All right. Yes. Another redhead. Gotta love that. This guy, I think, could be like, okay, when I say star, he's got a high ceiling for the future. Obviously, we're not talking about like, he's not going to win a Hart or anything like that, but I think he's got a high ceiling potentially for the future. Obviously, Dylan DeMello was kind of surprising to see. They protected Logan Stanley on the defensive end and left DeMello unprotected for Winnipeg. And so a lot of people were looking at DeMello and thinking DeMello was going to be the pick, but I'm glad they stuck with Appleton. I think that was a very, very good pick. All right, we're getting to the Seattle's rivals now. So we're getting to the Pacific Division, and now, that's right, do some damage to your division rivals. Which, good thought. The Pacific Division is not strong, and the one team that is strong in the Pacific Division is not a part of this expansion draft. That's the Golden Knights. So, and respect to the Oilers, obviously they've got an incredible top end, but yeah, not a great division outside of Vegas and Edmonton. And if you're a Sharks fan, I know the Sharks are trying, but we've seen how the couple of years went. Hayden Fleury. So they got both the Fleury brothers. Oh, no, Hayden's actually here. So you got Hayden here, but you couldn't bring. I guess they probably didn't want to bring Kale in case people saw Kale around. And they're like, oh, so they're taking Kale and not Price. Yeah, we'll see if they keep both of them because again, we've talked about there's going to be some trades coming in the next few days, and this roster is not going to look. There's going to be a lot of changes by the start of the season, but just for the story of it, I hope they keep both Kale and Hayden. Hayden could probably be third pair defense right away. Kale's probably starts in the AHL, so we're probably still a couple of years away from them playing potentially on a line together, but it'd be fun to have a brother line. That'd be fun. Or not line, sorry, defensive pairing, but from the Ducks. Hayden was one of the better, definitely one of the better options. I think that's who I took in my mock draft. He was definitely one of the better options from the Ducks. It's pretty clear, like they've taken some decent sized contracts, but it's pretty clear with this, especially with what happened in Philadelphia, for example, that they didn't go with JVR, that they're trying to stay pretty low cap wise, smaller cap. So we'll see what happens now with the Flames. We'll see what happens here. Obviously, one of the biggest names that is available here is also a big contract on an older player in Mark Giordano. Wow, they did go with Giordano. All right, so they've got Giordano and Alexiak. Wow, all right, so they avoid some big contracts elsewhere and then end up with Mark Giordano. Yeah, it's got to be weird for him. Like, obviously, he wants to be excited about, for a new team and the new fan base. Yeah, but it's got to be weird having been with the same fan base, same team for 15 years, and now he's talking about they've got a young team, a lot of young talent. Says that's kind of how the NHL is. Yeah, well, he is 37, so most of the NHL is gonna look young to him. But he's, he just won the Norris 2 years ago, so like, not washed yet. Adam Larson from the Oilers. Interesting. All right. So he's a UFA. So again, another guy that guess I'm sure they've been talking contract with and hopefully have something lined up. Okay, so they're saying he did sign a new contract to join. They got some big size. They got a lot of size on this team, so they're going big and physical, which McDermott definitely helps with. But Andreas Anastasiou was there. There were some options I definitely expected over. Again, not like there's amazing options necessarily from LA, like a lot of the Pacific Division right now, but like Cale Clegg on the defensive end was one. Blake Lizotte, Austin Wagner, who we talked about, Brendan Lemieux. None of these guys are superstars by any means, so like I don't think it makes a massive difference. But I wonder if a trade happened there because I was not expecting that. Alexander True, interesting. And so I didn't think, like, because Donato was exposed, which was a surprise, I didn't think that Donato would be. I didn't think that True would get past Donato as a pick, and with again Gambrell probably being the one I was expecting. But solid young prospect type player. They've got a lot of young guys that have not done a lot in the NHL. So, but they're only supposed to have 8 to 12 slots with the Checkers, and they've got a lot of guys now that are more AHL than NHL at this point. I think they all have some NHL experience, but not a lot. So, yeah, it'll be interesting. Interesting to see what they do with the AHL. The True was with the Thunderbirds, won a championship with the Thunderbirds. So that's got Seattle tie there with Alex True. Played for the T-Birds. I think they actually won the championship. His last game with the T-Birds was the championship winning one, if I'm not mistaken. Cole Lind is a good pick. Good pick. So I only didn't take Cole Lind. The only reason I didn't take Cole Lind in my draft was because the way I had mine set up, I needed to meet requirements, which is why I was taking McEwen. But Cole Lind was probably the best pick they had from Vancouver. There really was not a lot there. That's what it looks like. It's a pretty young-looking roster. Again, I'm going to get the last couple names in here. Lots of more UFAs than I was expecting. That was kind of a surprise. They got Jamie Alexiak, Adam Larson, Drieger we kind of already knew. Anyway, there's a couple more UFAs. There was like 4 or 5 UFAs, which is more than I was expecting. So a lot of that's going to come down from guys, like the roster's not going to be 30 players, obviously. So even before you consider the fact that that's going to come down from that, they've got a lot of room for free agency. And there are some big names in free agency. Dougie Hamilton, especially with the ties that they have to Carolina, I would be pretty surprised if they don't take a swing at Dougie Hamilton. Landeskog would be another one. I would be pretty surprised if they didn't take a pretty big swing at Landeskog. And then you ended up basically getting Jonas Donskoy and Landeskog from the Avs, which the Kraken got a lot of cap space, and they could probably pay him $9 million if they wanted to. Make sure they lock him up. So they got a decent looking team, honestly, in this entry draft. If you look at this roster and the roster, like at the time, obviously things changed. If you look at the roster at the day that they took it for Vegas, that was people looked at Vegas's roster after their draft and were expecting them to be a bottom 3 team. They ended up winning the Pacific and going to the Stanley Cup Finals, largely because of the trades they made. In that, as well as the fact that you had guys like William Karlsson, Flower, that like both of those two guys especially Karlsson, had their best years of their career in the first season in Vegas. So that's something that, like, Seattle is, like, if Seattle wants to be a really good team out of the gate, there's gonna have to be some guys that have career years in the first season. But if you look at this Seattle roster with these 30 guys compared to the day that roster for Vegas was put together, I think this one looks better. I don't think that's a stretch to say. We know they're going to do things in free agency, and there's some big names because there were teams that specifically signed a lot of contracts over the last few years so that they would expire this season, because they wanted more flexibility when it came to making protection lists. But what that also does is it now makes this free agency period one where there are a lot of names available, more so than the typical free agency period. And now the Kraken are coming in with a lot of cap space to play with. Because of the flat cap, a lot of teams are strapped for cap space. Because the contracts that are still going right now were not signed. Most of them were not signed thinking that there was going to be, that the cap was going to be stuck at $81.5 million for now 3 years going, and it's going to go past that. So they've still got $20 million of cap space, which makes them one of the teams that'll have the most buying power in free agency. So free agency is going to be big. buying power as far as trades are concerned as well. They can take on some contracts there. Otherwise, again, thanks for joining me. Hope you guys had as fun a time with this as I did, and we'll see the Kraken at the start of the season. Go Kraken!